We need to build more homes faster.
Faster.
And faster than ever before.
We have young people living on the streets.
Pleading for housing options that are within reach.
It's a supply and demand issue.
If we do not build more housing, this will get worse.
As the sun sets over the sprawling urban landscapes of Canada, casting long shadows on bustling cities, one pressing dilemma looms large in the minds of residents: a housing crisis of unprecedented proportions. With each passing day, the dream of owning a home slips further from the grasp of ordinary Canadians, leaving them stranded in a sea of uncertainty. More than half, 1 million of 1.9 million new households by 2030, will not be able to buy a home, according to estimates. That's equivalent to almost all the households in the Atlantic Canada region. Housing affordability is cutting through to government policies on immigration and education and impacting Canada's reputation and ability to attract talent and investment. The average Canadian home price was $685,809 in February 2024, up more significantly with a 4% monthly increase and up 3.5% year over year. This insinuates home prices have increased by a staggering 88% over the past 20 years, while wages have only grown by 20%, indicating that housing costs are growing more than 4 times faster than incomes, leaving many Canadians struggling to keep up. The situation is execrable in some of Canada's largest cities. The average home price in Vancouver is over $1.2 million, while in Toronto it's over $1 million. These prices put home ownership out of reach for many young Canadians who are forced to spend an ever-increasing share of their incomes on rent or live with their parents well into adulthood. Home resales in the country also decreased by 3.1% in January and February, offsetting nearly 25% of the 12.7% gain in the preceding 2 months. With 461,000 units sold in February, roughly 11% less than the 10-year average, the overall situation is still muted. So what's driving the crisis, and how can the damaged Canadian housing system be fixed? There exist viable solutions capable of turning the tide in favor of Canadians, from innovative policy reforms to community-driven initiatives and reduction of red tape and regulations. A myriad of options lay at our disposal. In this video, we will delineate the factors spurring the housing bubble in Canada, potential solutions to the housing crisis, and real-world examples of how these solutions could make a difference. At the heart of this housing crisis lies a stark reality: skyrocketing housing prices that have left many Canadians priced out of the market. Many factors are at play, but one of the biggest is lack of housing supply. According to a report by the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, or the CMHC, Canada needs to build at least 3.5 million new homes by 2030 to keep up with population growth and household formation. Unsurprisingly, the nation is falling far short of that target. Recent reports stipulate that Canada currently faces a huge deficit of over 300,000 housing units, and it's only going to get worse as Canada's population continues to grow. So why is the Canadian government not building enough homes for residents? One of the most significant factors is red tape and regulation. In Canada today, it can take up to 2 years to get a building permit in some Canadian cities, while zoning regulations and other restrictions make it difficult or impossible to build the kind of high-density housing needed to keep up with demand. Another factor is high taxes and fees. According to a report by the C.D. Howe Institute, government fees and charges can add up to $168,000 to the cost of a new home in some Canadian cities. That's a huge burden for builders and developers who are often forced to pass those costs on to buyers and renters. But perhaps the biggest factor of all is simply a lack of incentives for builders to create affordable housing. In many cases, it's more profitable for developers to build luxury condos and high-end homes than to create affordable apartments and starter homes. That's led to a situation where many Canadians are being priced out of the market entirely. So what can be done to address this crisis? The options are as diverse as the Canadian landscape itself. From bold policy reforms to innovative community-driven initiatives, the arsenal of potential solutions is vast and varied. One of the most important is simply to reduce red tape and regulation. By streamlining the building permit process and easing zoning restrictions, we can make it easier and faster for builders to create the high-density, affordable housing that's so desperately needed. An egregious example of how excessive regulation can stifle housing development is the case of Toronto's Yellow Belt. This term refers to the large swath of land in Toronto that's zoned exclusively for single-family homes, making it illegal to build anything else. This has resulted in the missing middle problem. This term means Toronto has a lot of low-density areas filled with single-family homes and high-density ones with tall condo and apartment buildings, but not much in between. According to a report by the Canadian Centre for Economic Analysis, this restrictive zoning is a major contributor to Toronto's housing shortage as it prevents the development of more affordable housing options like apartments and townhouses. The report estimates that if just 10% of the Yellow Belt was rezoned to allow for medium-density housing, it could create numerous new housing units. Minneapolis, Minnesota is an example of an area that enforced this solution, making it the first major U.S. city to eliminate single-family zoning citywide. This effect means that developers can now build duplexes and triplexes on any residential lot in the city, creating more housing options for residents at various price points. If Canadian cities were to follow suit and ease zoning restrictions in this way, it could go a long way toward addressing the housing shortage and making Canadian cities more affordable and accessible. Another key solution is to reduce taxes and fees on new housing development. By lowering the cost of building new homes, we can incentivize developers to create more affordable options and help keep prices down for buyers and renters. And there's no better example of how high taxes can stifle housing development than in Vancouver, which has some of the highest housing costs in the world. According to a recent report, the total cost of government fees represents 32.72% of the rent that the end user pays in a typical wood frame, purpose-built rental development in Vancouver. Municipal fees account for most of the total at 44.27%, federal and provincial fees account for 28.39% and 24.15% respectively. That's a massive burden for developers who are often forced to pass those costs on to buyers and renters at higher prices. In cities like Seattle, the use of fees and charges as deterrents to housing development has been truncated by implementing a new housing affordability and livability agenda that includes several tax breaks and incentives for developers who build affordable housing. Under the program, developers who set aside a certain percentage of their units for low and moderate income households can receive tax exemptions and other financial incentives. This has helped to spur the development of thousands of new affordable housing units in the city, and it's a model that Canadian cities could look to emulate. The government can encourage the construction of more homes by offering tax breaks or financial support to developers who build a certain number of affordable housing units. This would increase the overall housing supply and ensure some homes are affordable for low-income individuals and families. Providing grants or low-interest loans to individuals or families who want to build their own homes can also contribute to mass production. Of course, some argue that the solution to Canada's housing crisis is to reduce immigration, which has no doubt played a role in driving up housing demand in Canada. Currently, annual immigration in Canada amounts to around 500,000 new immigrants, one of the highest rates per population of any country in the world. Immigrants account for over 75% of population growth in Canada's largest cities, and this growth has put pressure on the housing market. However, it's important to note that immigrants are also a key driver of economic growth and innovation in Canada. According to a report, immigration is set to provide all of Canada's net labor force growth over the next 20 years, and immigrants are more likely than native-born Canadians to start businesses and create jobs. So while reducing immigration might provide some short-term relief for the housing market, it could also have long-term negative consequences for Canada's economy and society as a whole. Instead, a better solution might be to focus on creating more housing supply in the areas where immigrants are most likely to settle, and there are some promising examples of how this can be done. For example, in Toronto, the nonprofit organization Options for Homes has been working to create affordable housing options for new Canadians and other low and moderate income households. Through a unique model that allows buyers to purchase homes with a minimal down payment and then build equity over time, Options for Homes has helped over 3,300 families become homeowners in the Greater Toronto area. Similarly, Vancouver has been working to create more affordable housing options for newcomers through its Affordable Housing Agency. The agency works with developers to create new affordable rental housing units, focusing on serving the needs of low-income households and vulnerable populations like refugees and asylum seekers. By focusing on creating more housing supply in the areas where immigrants are most likely to settle, and by working with nonprofit organizations and other partners to develop affordable housing options for newcomers, the Canadian government can address the housing needs of new Canadians while also supporting the long-term economic and social benefits of immigration. Another potential solution to Canada's housing crisis is incentivizing builders to create more affordable housing. This approach involves offering tax incentives, grants, or other financial benefits to developers, prioritizing the construction of affordable housing units. By providing these incentives, governments can encourage builders to focus on projects that meet the needs of low- and middle-income Canadians rather than solely pursuing high-end developments aimed at maximizing profits. These policies have been successfully implemented in cities like Vancouver and Toronto, where they have helped to increase the supply of affordable housing and create more diverse and inclusive communities. For example, in 2017, the Government of Ontario introduced a new Development Charges Rebate program that provides rebates of up to $125,000 per unit for developers who build rental housing that meets certain affordability criteria. The program has helped to spur the development of thousands of new affordable rental units across the province, and it's a model that other provinces and municipalities could look to emulate. Additionally, governments can provide direct subsidies or grants to developers who commit to building affordable housing projects. These funds can offset construction costs, making it more financially feasible for builders to create accessible housing for a broader range of income levels. Finally, one of the most essential solutions to Canada's housing crisis is to speed up project approvals and reduce the time it takes to get new housing developments off the ground. In some parts of Canada, it takes up to 10 years to complete a new housing development from the initial planning stages to final occupancy. This lengthy process not only delays the much-needed supply of housing, but also drives up costs for developers, which are ultimately passed on to homebuyers and renters. A prime example of how streamlining the approval process can make a significant difference is the case of Edmonton's expedited approvals process for affordable housing projects. Under this program, developers who build affordable housing can have their projects fast-tracked through the approvals process, with a target of getting shovels in the ground within 6 months of application. This initiative has already shown promising results, with several affordable housing projects being approved and constructed in record time. Expanding and ensuring such policies proliferated to needed areas would undoubtedly create visible changes in the Canadian housing landscape. As home ownership becomes increasingly inaccessible to Canadians, both federal and provincial governments would have to implement policies that directly target the impact of the housing crisis. Policy responses that address affordability, rising prices, rising rates, and the decreasing housing supply in Canada will solve the issues of the current market and alleviate the financial strain it's caused potential buyers. By reducing red tape and regulation, lowering taxes and fees, incentivizing affordable housing development, and streamlining project approvals, Trudeau's government can make real progress toward creating a more affordable, accessible, and sustainable housing market for all Canadians. If you like this video, hit the like button and help us spread the word. And don't forget to subscribe to get notifications on our latest news and analysis. In the meantime, check out one of these videos here to learn more. Thanks for watching.